My mother's birthday only comes once a year, and every year, I tell myself this time will be different. This time, the candles will burn soft, the laughter will be real, and nobody will leave the table feeling smaller than when they sat down. I spent 3 weeks planning that dinner. I made her favorite, pot roast with rosemary, roasted carrots, homemade rolls that I burned on the first batch and started over. My son Marcus helped me set the table. He folded every napkin into a triangle, his little tongue poking out the corner of his mouth the way it does when he's concentrating hard. He wore his blue button-down shirt, the one I bought on sale at Target, but ironed so carefully it looked like it came off a department store rack. He'd asked me that morning, "Mama, do I look nice?" I'd kissed his forehead and said, "You look perfect, baby." He believed me. That's the thing about 7-year-olds, they still believe you. The house smelled like rosemary and vanilla cake. My mother was glowing. Grandpa Earl sat at the head of the table, quiet the way he always is, watching everything, saying little. My father walked in last. He always walks in last. My father has a way of entering a room like he's grading it. He scanned the table, the rolls, the centerpiece, the mismatched chairs we'd borrowed from the garage. His eyes moved slow, the way a man's do when he's already decided he's unimpressed. He kissed my mother on the cheek, shook hands with my uncle. Then his gaze landed on Marcus. Marcus was reaching across the table, trying to straighten the little birthday banner we'd taped to the vase. So innocent, so completely unaware. My father walked over, and for one stupid, hopeful second, I thought he was going to hug him. Instead, he grabbed Marcus by the shoulders and spun him around to face the room, like a prop, like a punchline he'd been saving. "Everyone look, this is my stinky grandson." He laughed at his own words. "Huisano, look dosano, noking. Look at these clothes." "What is this? A clearance rack special?" The table stuttered. A fork clinked against a plate. My sister laughed, not nervously, genuinely, like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. Marcus didn't cry. He just looked down at his blue shirt, that ironed, perfect, beloved blue shirt. And something in his small face quietly closed. I pushed my chair back slowly. The scrape of it against the floor was the loudest thing in the room for a moment. My heart was doing something violent inside my chest. Not rage exactly, more like a dam recognizing its own crack. I looked at Marcus. He hadn't moved, still staring down at his shirt, one hand gripping the tablecloth corner like he needed something to hold on to. 7 years old. And already learning that love in this family comes with conditions. I opened my mouth. But Grandpa Earl moved first. Not fast. Earl doesn't do anything fast anymore. He's 73, with bad knees and a hearing aid he forgets to wear. But he pushed himself up from that chair with a steadiness that silenced the room before he even spoke. He didn't look at my sister, didn't look at my mother, who was frozen with her hands folded over her birthday napkin, eyes cast down. He looked directly at my father. The way a man looks at another man when pleasantries are finished. My father actually shifted his weight. Just slightly. Just enough. Marcus finally looked up, sensing something in the air that even a child could feel. Something was about to be said that couldn't be unsaid. Grandpa Earl set his napkin down like a period at the end of a sentence. He didn't raise his voice. That's what I'll remember most. There was no trembling anger, no dramatic pause for effect. Just a man who had lived long enough to know that the quietest words carry the most permanent weight. He said, "Richard." Just that. Just my father's name. But the way he said it made my father stand completely still. "You've been sitting at tables like this one your whole life," Earl continued, talking loud so nobody notices you've got nothing real to say. My sister stopped smiling. "That boy you just embarrassed?" Earl's eyes dropped to Marcus, soft as a held breath. "He spent 3 days last month writing a letter to his sick teacher. 3 days. Rewrote it 4 times because he wanted every word to be kind. I hadn't even known that. He carries groceries for the woman next door without being asked. He shares his Lunch. When somebody forgets theirs. Earl looked back at my father. His clothes don't tell you who he is, Richard. But the way you just treated him? He let that sit. That told us everything about who you are. The candles flickered. Nobody reached for their fork. My father's jaw tightened, but no words came. My mother cried first. Not loud, not dramatic. Just 2 tears that slipped down her face while she stared at the pot roast she'd been so happy about an hour ago. She didn't wipe them, just let them fall like she was too tired to pretend anymore. My sister had her eyes fixed on her plate, that smirk, completely gone now, replaced by something I recognized. Shame doesn't always look like remorse. Sometimes it looks exactly like silence. My father opened his mouth twice, closed it both times. I walked around the table and crouched down in front of Marcus. His eyes were still glassy, but he hadn't cried, and somehow that hurt more than if he had. Children who learn to hold it in have usually had practice. I took both his small hands in mine. "You know what Grandpa Earl just said about you?" I whispered. He nodded barely. Every single word was true. His bottom lip trembled once. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against my shoulder. I held him there, one hand on the back of his head. Behind me, I heard Earl lower himself back into his chair. Slow, steady, like a man who had done what needed doing. My father did something I never expected. He sat down, not stormed out, not doubled down with another cutting remark the way he usually does when he feels cornered. He just sat, heavily, like the air had gone out of something inside him that had been inflated for years. My uncle quietly refilled everyone's water glasses, the small human gesture of a man trying to give the room somewhere to breathe. My mother finally wiped her face. She reached over and touched Earl's hand, just briefly, just her fingers over his knuckles, and Earl turned his palm up and held hers without a word. 46 years they'd been family. Some things don't need language. Marcus had pulled back from my shoulder. He was watching my father now, with that particular curiosity children have, unfiltered, unafraid, still open in ways adults have long since closed themselves off. My father felt it, that gaze. He looked at his grandson, really looked, maybe for the first time, and something moved across his face that I didn't have a name for. Not quite guilt, not quite grief, something older than both. "Marcus," he said quietly. The whole table held its breath. Marcus tilted his head slightly, waiting, and my father, for once in his life, didn't know how to continue. My father is not a man who apologizes. I've known that my entire life. Apologies require you to sit inside your own wrongness. And my father has never been comfortable in small spaces, so what came out was clumsy, incomplete. The verbal equivalent of a man reaching for something on a high shelf and almost getting there. "You're a good kid," he said to Marcus. I was joking around. It wasn't enough. We all knew it. But Marcus, my 7-year-old, letter-writing, lunch-sharing, grocery-carrying boy, looked at my father for a long moment. Then he said, "It's okay, Grandpa. Sometimes people say the wrong thing." The simplicity of it devastated the room. My sister exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding it since Earl stood up. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth, because a child had just extended grace that none of us adults had managed to locate. Earl caught my eye from across the table. Just a look. But it carried everything. That is who he is. My father nodded slowly, looked down at the table. For the first time all evening, he seemed genuinely small. My mother blew out her candles quietly that night. No big countdown, no dramatic moment. Just her leaning forward, closing her eyes for a breath longer than necessary. Whatever she wished for, kept entirely to herself. And then a gentle exhale that took every flame with it. We key. Slowly, carefully, the way people eat when a meal has become about more than food. My father stayed until the end. He helped carry dishes to the kitchen without being asked, something I had never once seen him do in 40 years of family dinners. He didn't make it a performance, just picked up plates and walked quietly to the sink, small, but real. Before we left, Earl knelt down, knees complaining, hand braced on the wall, and looked Marcus directly in the eyes. "You know what you are?" he said. Marcus shook his head. "Exactly the kind of man this family needs more of." Marcus smiled. That full, uncomplicated smile that 7-year-olds give when they feel completely seen. Driving home, he fell asleep in the back seat, still wearing his blue, button-down shirt. Still perfect. Still beloved. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and thought, some people spend their whole lives learning what he already knows. How to be kind, even when nobody taught them. Marcus woke up before me. I found him at the kitchen table, still in his pajamas, carefully folding a piece of paper, colored pencils scattered around him like a small explosion of effort. "What are you making, baby?" I asked, reaching for the coffee pot. He covered it with both hands, protective, shy. "It's not done yet." I smiled and let him be. 20 minutes later, he slid it across the table to me. A drawing, crayon and colored pencil, slightly crooked the way all the best things are. 5 people sitting around a table, candles on a cake, and, at the head of the table, a tall figure he'd colored silver. Grandpa Earl, unmistakably. Underneath, in his careful 7-year-old handwriting, "The best birthday ever." I sat with that for a long moment. The kitchen quiet, the coffee warm, my son watching my face the way children do when they've made something and need to know it landed. "Can we give it to Great-Grandpa Earl?" he asked. "First thing," I said. Later that afternoon, Earl held that drawing with both hands, read those 4 words 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart, where it stayed.